part interview, part commentary track, all podcast. Watching Robocop with Kid Power. Our very special guest, Dr. Sandifer. Hello everybody, hello, welcome back, welcome to episode 15 of Watching Robocop with Kid Power. Episode 15. Wowza. Start off with the apologies, obviously. Sorry this got delayed. I promised you 2 episodes in February, didn't I? And then life happened, so it didn't happen. But the good news is you are getting 2 episodes in March. I absolutely guarantee it. And the reason I can do that is because they're both already recorded. So this is the first of 2 Robocop episodes you will be getting this month to bring us back on terms. And then next month I've got a wonderful bonus episode recorded with George Lee. More on that in just a moment. Before we get to the episode proper and my incredible, wonderful, spectacular guest, I do just want to do a bit of housekeeping. Firstly, that publishing news I've been teasing you with for a little while now, I can now announce that a short story of mine is going to be appearing in the horror anthology book New Fears 2. This book is edited by the incredible Mark Morris and is released by Titan Books. The story is called Fishhooks. And I managed to get in the anthology as part of an open call for new writers. The majority of the people in the anthology were invited, and there's writers such as Rob Sherman, Stephen Volk, and many other incredibly talented professional writers who are appearing in the book. And then there's me and my story, which got in through the open submission call. Frankly, I couldn't be prouder, both of the story and of the accomplishment of appearing in this anthology. I do hope you all go and pick it up as soon as it comes out. All false modesty aside, it's probably the best short story I've ever written, and I knew I was proud of it, but I'm over the moon to see that it got the recognition it deserved. This really feels like a step change for me. It feels like a step up. This is my first professional rate short story sale, and what an anthology to be in, what a series to be a part of. Obviously, thanks to Mark Morris for taking my story. That's a huge plus. And yeah, get out there and grab it as soon as it becomes available. New Fears 2, Titan Books. Go and pick up New Fears 1, by the way, as well, because that's an awesome anthology as well, which came out last year. And it's a great series. It deserves your support. If short horror fiction is the kind of thing you like, and if it's not, why are we even talking? I don't know. Who are you? Okay, so that's it as far as publishing news is concerned. Podcasting news, I guess I should mention. Wrong with Authority rumbles on. We've recorded a commentary track on Ghostbusters since last we spoke, which has also been released. Wrong with Authority 8 dropped this week as I record, which is an episode on Braveheart, and is all the fun of the fair with the full gang there talking about that. Jack and Daniel did a lovely little episode where they did a commentary track for Blade Runner and talked about the new Blade Runner movie. And it seems to be churning along quite well at the moment, Wrong with Authority. We seem to be producing new material quite regularly. So go over to our Wrong with Authority blog spot, check out what's there, download, listen, enjoy. It's all in good fun. As far as this podcast is concerned, unfortunately, my Patreon's fluctuating a bit at the moment. We're below the level at which I can afford to keep doing bonus episodes. That's a real shame because I just, in anticipation of the fact that I was above the $20, I just started a new bonus episode series. Now, this is called Kit and It. And the plan was for it to run bi-monthly, and I'd interview an author or creative of some kind about Stephen King's It and the associated movie and TV miniseries from the 90s. I'd still very much like to run that series, and I have recorded an episode with George Lee already. So what I'm planning on doing basically is recording those and releasing them bi-monthly, alternating with Robocop commentaries until such time as the Patreon gets back above $20, at which point Robocop can go back to a monthly basis with Kit and It running bi-monthly. I hope that's okay with you guys. It's just the more I've done that show, the more I'm really excited. Although it's obviously not Robocop, it is a piece of work. Stephen King's It is one of those pieces of work that I have a similar level of obsession with, and I think the sheer scale of the book means that there'll be enough different conversations to have about it to make it worthwhile. So there you go. I hope you'll find that to be exciting news. I hope you enjoy the episode of Kit and It when it drops next month. And as I said, if you want Robocop to go back to being monthly, you know the drill. Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get 7 days early access to all podcast episodes. 7 days early access to My Life in Horror. If you're backing at $3 a month, every single week you can watch me write for 2 hours, whether that's a chapter of my new book, short story or essay. You get a little peek behind the curtain and you get to read. Often you'll get to read material there many months ahead of publication. I'm also dropping weekly bonus material now of some kind, whether that's a review, non-fiction, fiction, book excerpts. So yeah, head on over to Patreon, $1 a month. Let's get this thing back up to 20 a month so that we can go back to doing Robocop on a monthly basis. I'd really like that. And of course, to all those of you who are already backing me on Patreon, thank you so much for your continued support and patience with me and my work. Things have been incredibly hectic in a really good way. I've got a lot of really exciting projects that I'm working on, most of which I can't really talk about. So your continued support is appreciated and will be repaid with content, I promise you that. And I have been very good on getting the weekly material out, as you'll be aware. Those backers, at least, you're getting to see the weekly writing, and that will continue because I'm really enjoying doing it, especially the weekly Watch Me Write sessions. So those will be continuing for the foreseeable future. Anyway, enough of the housekeeping. Let's talk about this show, because we have got an absolute cracker lined up for you. None other than the legendary Dr. Sandifer of Eruditorum Press. Dr. S is a superb writer on all things Who, as you'll be aware, and is also just an incredibly knowledgeable person about science fiction generally, and a really superb guest. Listen out for lots of talk of cyberpunk on this particular episode. The other thing about Dr. S is Dr. S had never actually seen Robocop until coming to record this podcast. So that leads to some very interesting conversations as well. And it goes in some different directions to the people who watched it at the same age as I did. We do obviously inevitably the odd Doctor Who digression here and there, because that's where we both kind of got to know each other, I guess, and just generally enjoy the show. Dr. Sandifer is an incredibly knowledgeable, exciting guest. The only thing I do want to mention is we recorded this one on Google Hangouts. We recorded it last year, as you'll be able to tell. It's an early 2017 recording, in fact. I was sitting on it until the good doctor had a show that they wanted me, something that they want me to promote that would make sense to release this. But for various reasons, it's been agreed that we're going to put it out this week instead, which is fine. I'm really excited to be getting out to you guys because I really enjoyed it. But just be aware that because we were recording on Google Hangouts and it was before I got my new internet connection, there is a delay. There was a delay on the connection. Now, the recording, you won't hear delays on it as such, because I managed to get the good doctor's end of the recording and splice it in with my own. So you won't hear the delay, but what you will hear are a number of occasions where we kind of almost talk over each other or bump into each other in the conversation. It's simply an artifact of the fact that in real time, when we were having the conversation, the connection speed was bad, and it led to occasional skips. So apologies for that, but the quality of the overall recording is actually very good, I think, and the conversation is just superb. I think genuinely it's one of the best episodes I've ever done. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up and get out of the way and let you guys listen to it. So enjoy the amazing Dr. Sandifer watching Robocop with Kit Power. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the show Dr. Phil Sandifer. Phil, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to have you on the show. Really looking forward to watching this film with you. Thanks for agreeing to come on. I'll start with the questions. The same 5 questions I ask every single guest. And we'll start with the first question. How old were you when you first saw Robocop?
34.
34. I'm going to ask an unsanctioned supplementary question here. How old are you now, Phil?
34.
Okay. I see how this is going to go. Okay. Second question. How many times have you seen Robocop?
1.
1. Okay. All right. Good. So tonight will be 2, though. So we're gonna double your exposure to this film, presumably.
Yes.
When is the Great. That's good. That's good. When is the last time you saw Robocop?
Last night.
Last.
I really just crammed for this podcast.
You know what? I know your writing schedule. I'm just flattered you watch it at all. I got to be honest.
There was a part of me that was like, okay, well, if I'm watching it for the podcast, maybe I'll just But I decided to do some research.
Well, I appreciate you doing the homework, man. That's good. Okay, so bearing in mind those first 3 answers, this should be interesting. I have to specify for this, there are absolutely no wrong answers to this question. I want to make that very clear. Question number 4, why do you think Robocop is the greatest movie ever made?
I can only assume because you were 13 when you watched it, and it was somewhere between 1987 and 1993.
For the record, the years are correct. I was in fact 11, but yes. Other than that,
11 works too. I considered like 12 or 13 there, but I decided 13 was the sort of right adolescent twerp. You probably also have to be male.
That may be true. I think.
I think it's really. It's a glorious 13-year-old boys movie, though.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I had Daniel Harper of Oi Spaceman on, and he talked about his movie was Terminator 2 for very similar reasons, and he was 11. So yeah, it's certainly in that wheelhouse. So finally, if you could just let everybody know which version of Robocop we're watching together tonight.
I'm told we're watching the director's cut, but we figured that out about 5 minutes ago before we started recording, and I'm just trusting you on this.
Okay, great. So
there are cuts of Robocop, apparently. We're already into advanced Robocop knowledge.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, what I love about it is the director's cut. I think it may even be less than a minute longer, but it just adds in about 3 scenes of ultra-violence that got snipped by the censors. That's really the only difference. Anyway.
There were a couple of those where I went, oh, that certainly earned its R.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so for those of you who are playing along at home, and if you are, I just want to let you know, you're fantastic. I love you. Don't ever change. We're going to start watching the movie, and I'll do the usual countdown from 5. So, Phil, if you got your finger on the pause button.
I do.
Awesome. So, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go Robo. And the lion roars.
Yes. Intimidating lion. Intimidating constellation.
Yeah. It was the mark of quality.
I remember that more or less, even though off the top of my head I can't name another Orion film. Was Blade Runner Orion too?
Yeah. Was which one?
Blade Runner.
I think Bill
Orion
and Ted
too?
were Orion for sure.
Oh, well, I'm Bill and Ted. That should have been my answer to why is Robocop the greatest film. It isn't. Bill and Ted is.
There you go, you see? Already it's an improvement. You have the...
Yes, the very montagey open, which was catchier than I expected, the opening of Robocop to be.
Yeah.
It starts more cleverly than I expected from, what I always imagined Robocop was.
Well, maybe that's something we could talk about a little bit, because obviously, having just seen the movie, I mean, I'm fully aware it will in many ways have dated terribly. But what was your impression of watching the film for the first time versus your expectations? Were you pleasantly surprised by what you saw in some ways?
Yeah, I mean, it was a smarter movie on the whole than its cultural reputation. Which, for me was basically thing that Nintendo games were based on. Because I had...
Yeah, sure.
Well, I mean, I had parents who were not very big on the let me watch rated R movies. Right. For, that sort of sweet spot of most of the 80s and 90s greatest rated R movies. So,
right.
Robocop, Terminator, these actually just aren't parts of my childhood except by reputation.
Oh, okay, I see, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I had to do some sneaking around to get to see this. It was a happenstance of staying at a friend's house.
Right, whereas, I didn't have any friends.
Right.
So, yeah.
I love how Yeah, go.
No, go.
I was just going to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fake news in relation to Russell T Davies, given your
yeah, though obviously another big influence on this that springs to mind for me is Judge Dredd. Yes. Which they even name check a little later when they have Robocop call someone creep. But
yeah.
So another one, the thing that I thought of. Given that this has clear comics influence, and Frank Miller is involved in one of the later ones I know, though I don't actually know which one offhand.
There are no secrets.
Is that the official policy of the podcast?
That's the official policy of reality, and I deny any other reality.
Fair enough, but I wonder if that news opening owes a debt to Howard Chaykin's American Flag.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
which
I'm
is
not
another.
With that. I don't know.
It's a stylistic cousin to 2000 AD. American, clearly bears some influence, but opened with this very, high context, not really doing explanations, just illustrations of the television of this fictional world.
Right.
Then actually Alan Moore nicked that style for opening Halo Jones. So.
Okay. I mean,
which you'd know if you'd read all of my book.
I'm waiting for the paperback, Phil. I'm really looking forward to it. I read all your stuff in paperback, and I'm really excited. I can't wait to get it. It's a special treat for me.
Has it just not arrived yet?
No, it's just not arrived yet. But I mean, if it's shipping from the States, it won't have done.
Yeah, fair enough.
I did get in the reaction of Basilisk through last year, the black and white through, which was glorious. So yeah. On the comic book thing, the other reference that I thought of was, and I checked out the dates, it was obviously Dark Knight Returns also uses that quite extensively, the news broadcasts to
right,
do a bit of world building and
yeah, I mean, and that's in the same general orbit, obviously, as American Flag and Halo Jones and Judge Dredd.
Sure.
There's not really enough Halo Jones influence on Robocop.
Not okay. Well, or indeed on the culture more generally, one could argue. I mean,
yes.
That's just a better world, isn't it? Where Halo Jones has a bigger footprint.
Yeah, I will. There was definitely a point in the opening where I was like, "Oh, the wrong cop's going to die and become a robot."
Yeah, they just weren't. Yeah, well, it was the 80s. I mean, that's one of the interesting things I think about this movie. Is like, it is. I think it's fair to say it was for the 80s. It was vaguely progressive, and it's horrendously dated at the same time. You look at it now, and it really does make you want to cry pretty much every other scene. And in terms of diversity and stuff like that, you just think, oh god.
And they really can't decide how competent they want Lewis to be.
my single biggest complaint with the film is... Yeah, go on, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she gets the, badass beating the suspect up intro, and that's literally the only moment she gets to be competent in the whole film.
Well, she teaches him she reminds him how to shoot later on. That's a nice... And she saves Robocop from the SWAT team.
Yeah, fair enough. But there's still, like, as soon as he takes the driver's seat, it's like, no, let's do a different character than the one we, set up in that first introduction.
Absolutely. And she does get the absolutely, like, unforgivably appalling scene where she can't resist looking at the black man's penis and is therefore beaten up, which is...
Everyone involved should be shot.
Exactly. I love this movie. I genuinely do love this movie. That is completely indefensible on every single level. And yes, all involved should have to do the dance of shame for several hours. It's no good. No good. Meanwhile, in corporate scumbag land...
yeah. With some really elegant exposition here.
Yeah. Well, this is the West Wing pedoconference before there was such a thing.
Yes. Robocop, an under-acknowledged influence on Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin? Oh, it's all coming out of the woodwork tonight, man. We're killing all the sacred cows tonight.
Yeah. It is, I mean, I do love a good, gratuitously corrupt boardroom, though.
Yeah, I do, and I mean, it's one of the things I really enjoy about the film, and I think does get missed by the people who engage with it as an action movie, which it is. It's a perfectly fine action movie, but there's actually the cynicism and anger in these sequences, I think, is palpable, and I think does kind of elevate the material above a lot of its kind of contemporaries. I mean, the fact that the corporation is clearly the biggest criminal organisation in the movie and goes completely untouched and unpunished that's quite. I mean, I know that's there's a way in which that's quite cynical, but it is also, as realistic then as it is now. And he's not something you'd see in a lot of sort of contemporary action movies from the period. So,
yeah, well, and that ties in with its clear cyberpunk influences, which are what ended up getting me interested in watching this film and coming on the podcast, because I'm in the early stages of a history of cyberpunk book, by which I mean getting ready to write it.
Oh, okay. So you sort of talk to me a bit about how that works. So I'm genuinely interested in I'm always interested in talking to writers about process. So are you, when you're doing, because all your stuff is non-fiction, right? So
pretty much, yeah. I mean, I sometimes it's non-fiction that I've just made up, but
okay. So you're looking at writing a book on cyberpunk. So I mean, I saw you in your initial sort of information gathering phase where you went on your social media accounts and you just said, tell me what I should be thinking of looking at if I'm doing a project on cyberpunk, and just, seeing your response to replies. But
and specifically angling for non-obvious stuff, yeah.
Right. So where are you at the moment? I assume at the moment you're in the media absorption phase of that project then, where you're just reading all the, the recommendations you've decided to read and watching and listening to stuff. Is that right? And are you? Yeah,
I did I did a sort of big bouncing around tour, just looking at random selections across the decades. Now I'm actually getting ready. I think I want to write a first chapter and see what happens there. So
sure,
I'm gearing up to write a first chapter that'll be on Neuromancer, Blade Runner, and Akira, arguing that the sort of confluence of those three is where it makes sense to start talking about cyberpunk as a genre.
Okay, that sounds
because they're all. Yeah, because they all were created independently, but clearly, tapping into the same concerns at the same time. So that'll be chapter one. But Robocop is only a couple of years later, so it'd be one of the earlier chapters.
Oh, okay. What did you think about? This is really inside baseball, but I'm just curious as I've got you. What did you think about Terminator in that context? Because that's earlier, I think, certainly earlier than Akira.
Yeah, it's certainly, Terminator is certainly one I'm gonna look at. It's on the list. It's not one I grabbed in my random zigzagging around survey. I watched Strange Days, which is written by Cameron.
Okay.
But Terminator I haven't actually watched yet. I love this scene, by the way. This scene might be the best thing in the film.
Good. Yeah, it's really great, isn't it? Because it's a combination of stuff. The robot design is awesome, I think. I love the stop frame. And again, the cynicism of it.
Yeah, and just everyone flipping the fuck out, and then throwing him out of the crowd to get shot is delightful.
Yeah. No, it's corporate shitweasels at their finest, isn't it?
And I assume this is one of those things that's longer in the director's cut.
That's right. Yeah, there are,
because that goes on too long.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, the fun story with it, they showed it for the censors and in front of a I don't know. The story is it was a combination test audience, censors. That can't be right. But anyway, the people were laughing all the way through that. But as soon as they got out, the censors were like, "You can't do that." I think they only cut 5 or 6 seconds, but they're long seconds, aren't they? When you see the actual...
it's because there's just clearly one more cut back to the exploding body than any filmmaking needed.
But interestingly, you see, this is the thing, that there's two main scenes like that. The other one is Robocop's execution. Now, I actually prefer that extended version of that execution scene because I actually think it's funnier. I think that gratuitous extra shot makes it unambiguously kind of slapsticky and comedic in a way that the shorter cut kind of doesn't. Because the thing with the shorter cut is you have the impact of the shooting and you're like, whoa, and it's really shocking, and then it's over. So you don't get to the point of, at least not until a repeat viewing, of realising the kind of dark comedy inherent in it. Whereas when the execution lasts that extra 5 or 6 seconds, it does actually, for me anyway, maybe I've just got an awful sense of humour, but I find it funnier. Whereas the execution of Robocop is the reverse. When Murphy's being executed, I'd always rather watch less of that than more of it. I find the extra stuff in that very hard to take.
Interesting. I'll have to look at that scene again, having not actually seen any other version of the movie.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, one of the reasons this movie is so totemic for me is because it represents a very clear dividing line in aesthetics for me. Where I vividly remember the first time I saw this movie thinking it was basically a horror movie and being genuinely horrified. But we had it on video and we watched it, me and my friend, maybe 10 or 12 times that weekend. And by the end of that weekend, I was laughing hysterically at the same things that had horrified me earlier. And looking back, I think it was the first time I'd had that experience aesthetically with something where I'd been horrified by it the first time and then found different layers in it a second time that have made me realise it was, there was a comedy element to it. I mean, it is still horrific, but it does make me chuckle now. And I think that's
and that's the Judge Dredd comedy style. It's that's the whole hook of the Judge Dredd concept that we're riffing on here is reveling in what you can get away with when you're being law and order. Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Although it is interesting that I think the obvious difference for me is that although Dredd's the protagonist, he's never the hero in the comics. And he's often the villain. Whereas in this...
Yeah, the film, I don't know, can't decide quite as clearly where it wants to come down.
No. Well, I mean, it kind of wants to have its cake and eat it, doesn't it? In the sense that the villains are laughable, cartoonish, kind of uber psychopath villains it's impossible to feel sympathy for because they have no interiority and blah, 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 which, bears no relation to criminals as real human beings in real world,
Right, I mean, about the only thing you can invest in is, oh, hey, it's Ray Weiss and that guy from ER.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, I personally have quite a strong attachment to Kurtwood Smith as well. But yes, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's, but they're deliberately, and the thing is, you kind of, I mean, this is not unique to Robocop. This is action movies in the 80s. You abdicate all responsibility for the depictions of violence by making the bad guys so bad that no one cares about them anymore. I mean, they cease to be functioning human beings and they just become cannon fodder. That's morally, that's what this kind of movie does. But the difference is that, Robocop / Murphy has a kind of emotional, moral journey which is somewhat at odds with that, with that cartoon style, which I think creates an interesting tension in the film.
Yeah. Because, and there is a sort of, they are strikingly over the top. You don't, these days, this over the top is, Heath Ledger Joker territory and nothing else.
Sure. That's actually a really good parallel. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is these days. This is so transgressive that you do it as Batman villain.
Yep.
Mostly, it's all the excessive cackling that puts it there.
That's true. And again, a facet I remember finding chilling as a kid, and then later on finding amusing. But that was another one of those features of it. Because of course, I mean, for me. I've spoken about this on the cast before, but the villains for me are a gang of school bullies. Just completely in function. And that obviously made them utterly, utterly terrifying when I was 11, because the only thing I could think of scarier than a gang of school bullies is a gang of school bullies with shotguns. That's just... So... Yeah, I mean, so they work on that level, but also that makes it basically impossible to feel any sympathy for them as human beings.
And so much. And it also it serves to make the movie far more conservative because obviously gangs of deranged, sadistic criminals running around the streets of Detroit is basically Reagan propaganda.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and that whole kind of speech the old man gives where he says, you know, Detroit has a cancer, the cancer is crime, and it's like, you don't understand crime or cancer at this point, if that's your analogy, you know, like...
Right, so notably that's, you know, and that's at least in the context of the boardroom scene, and thus defaults to wanting to be read satirically.
Yeah, it is, but I agree with that, but I do worry that the film doesn't do anything to cut against it with its actual depictions of criminality. That's the only slight problem.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying, is it's when you get to the criminals that the boardroom is set up for a satire that the rest of the film isn't willing to commit to.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that is down to the need for it to be a functioning 80s action movie as well as a satire, you know, like because it is clearly needing to be both in order to get made, I guess, at that point with the budget and what have you. And,
yeah.
Yeah.
The running
go
comedy sketch in the background is a strange one.
Yeah, it's really odd. I mean, my take on that is it's Paul Verhoeven's own kind of filtering of this is what I think American sitcoms look like, you know?
Yeah, but it's most of the sketches of the media ecosystem of this world are doing some important tonal work for establishing the world. That just doesn't quite fit.
Yeah. It's very, very strange. There's a lovely story about Nancy Allen on her first day on set when they were actually filming the sitcom, and the very first thing she saw was, Verhoeven directing the sitcom sequence with no context whatsoever, and she was just terrified that she'd made an awful, awful mistake, like, what have I done? Who is this guy and what is he doing,
Also funny is the fact that the villain looks kind of like William Gibson.
Oh, that's great.
Which is an odd detail of its cyberpunk.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's I think it's a great choice of casting for this villain. I love the look of him. I think there's something, it's just the incongruity of his physical look combined with the ruthlessness of his behavior. I think it makes for a really good villain. I think it works really well.
Yeah, he is solid, especially as the ringleader of this, ridiculous crew.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's actually a very tough gig, isn't it?
Yeah, and so the sort of balding schlub of a ringleader works.
Yeah. Well, I had another guest on the show actually who had this whole theory that this was the bank gang from Heat who'd just fallen on hard times and gotten to the point where they no longer cared and they'd lost their deep-rooted competence and just gotten all sloppy and... Oof.
Yeah, this does go on.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, this scene coming so soon after, it's obvious double in the boardroom. Because they do play with such different tones despite being basically the same joke.
Yeah, sure. But it's almost like it doesn't feel like a joke this time. I mean, I guess because we know, by this point, we know Murphy as a character at least a little bit, and we've been invited to sympathise with him, and therefore, whereas we don't know anything about Mr. Kenny, he's there and then he's gone. It's not quite, and he's part of the suit culture that we're the film is priming us to despise.
Right, but whereas we're supposed to like the good cop.
Yeah. But you could almost read that as Verhoeven kind of, pointing the finger at us for laughing at Kenny's execution, right? That could almost be like, you could almost see it in those terms.
Yeah, I mean, it though, if so, it's about the last interesting thing this movie has to say about violence.
Yeah, true. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan when Moffat pulls that kind of shit either. To be perfectly honest, it's not my favourite thing for writers to do, to set audience expectations up a certain way and then go, you shouldn't like that. Well, you fucking told me to, Anyway, sorry, off topic.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's what this is going for. I think it might just really like violence.
Yeah. No, you're right. That may be a product of having seen it too many times. But that's fine. So if I can just, while we're watching the... I do like this, by the way, the POV... the POV ER sequence. I think it's really well put together. I wanted to ask... Sorry, just to go back to...
We're having our PAL NTSC thing, because I'm not in the ER yet.
Oh, shit. Sorry. Okay, tell me... What have you got on screen at the moment?
He just got pulled off the helicopter from me. So.
Oh, okay. All right, then that's cool. I'll pause for 20 seconds or so to get resynced. But yeah. While this sequence is going on, just let me know when you get to his family waving at him, and I'll hit play again.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a bit about process. So you've done you're doing your information gathering. You're looking at chapter 1. So. Do you then? I mean, are you taking notes while you're watching the material and absorbing it the first time, or do you do second reads, or how does that work?
Not yet. I'm going to do a second read for everything here, which is part of why I kind of stopped the tourism, is I realized I was going to have to rewatch all this. So,
right.
So I sort of switched to, I'll probably look at things in the level of detail they need when I'm writing about them.
Okay.
But lost my train of thought. It is waving, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Just happened.
Great. Yeah, no, that's fine.
So
no, just ask yeah, go on.
Process, right? It's going to be much more. Reason. I don't know if I'm going to do the book in completely linear order or jump around, but I think the first chapter is obviously the one to start with, at least.
Yeah.
And then I might go linearly. I might jump around chapters after that.
I mean, I can't really argue with Neuromancer, Blade Runner, and Akira's Ground Zero. That's pretty.
I really don't want to get too much into proto-cyberpunk, except where I have to. There's no avoiding Philip K. Dick a little bit, just because, there's so many movie adaptations of him that are relevant. But I don't want to bog it down in, 4 chapters of waiting to get to cyberpunk. Especially because one of the things I'm interested in doing is not... stopping cyberpunk in the mid-90s, letting it go into the 21st century, and taking up stuff like Mr. Robot, like Avatar, which I was surprised no one ever puts on lists of cyberpunk. And in fact, when I mentioned that, everyone was like, Avatar isn't cyberpunk. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, you have jacking into people's bodies, and it's by the director of Terminator and the writer of Strange Days. What do you want? It's it's obviously cyberpunk, except for the era, except for the fact that cyberpunk seems in some sense rooted to the 80s and 90s. So I want to challenge that instead of getting bogged down in proto cyberpunk.
No, that's interesting. I like the notion that cyberpunk's still going and we've just stopped calling it that. I think that's really appeals to me quite a lot.
One of the triggers in wanting to write the book was the joke going around in summer and fall of 2016, calling the world the cyberpunk dystopia nobody wanted. The idea that cyberpunk is so obviously relevant to the present day that you can't declare it stopped before the present day, especially when you have, stuff that's still using all the signifiers, and the stuff from the 80s and 90s looks more prescient than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, the thing that I immediately went to there was the kind of, almost all dystopian / cyberpunk predicts the surveillance state, and that, we are pretty much there, I think. I think reality is pretty much caught up with that, And again, that may be the future nobody wanted, but it is kind of the one we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, what interests me is how much of the surveillance state, none of the surveillance state stuff, or even really cyberpunk, for all it caught the internet, it didn't catch social media.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Like, social media is definitely one of the bigger things cyberpunk failed to predict.
Yeah. That's
despite
a really
being,
interesting point.
In practice, integral to the surveillance state, and in fact, more important to it than sticking cameras up everywhere. Sifting through the information that cameras or mass audio recording gets you is still a hard enough challenge that even if they do it, it's not useful per se. I actually feel relatively unthreatened by the idea that all my phone calls are being recorded. Just because, the scale of getting any information out of it strikes me as a reasonable protection.
Sure.
I don't like having my phone calls recorded, but it doesn't freak me out as much. But then social media turns out to be like the real tool for surveillance. It turns out, the surveillance state can get us to do it ourselves.
Yeah, it's a voluntary process. We just sign away our rights to privacy through the platforms we agree to host all our shit on, right? And have our conversations.
Yeah. I mean, it's even the most dystopian surveillance states never quite came up with the idea that, we'd voluntarily do the labor of surveilling ourselves.
I didn't think I could be more depressed about 2017, Phil, but I think you may have done it there. That's thank you for that.
Happy to help. So yeah,
shit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's prescient. The digestive system discursion is really strange.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. I think it's purely to set up the baby food in the final act so that he's got something to shoot at. I don't really, because he never eats it. It never comes back as a plot point. So I'm not quite sure what that's about, really. I had Jane. Sorry, go on.
No, I want to hear what Jane said about it, because I bet that's
Jane's theory was that it was all to do with rebirth, and it was basically symbolic of the fact that he had become a child again. He was effectively a baby. He was a newborn in the world. So that was
though the fact that seemingly what they retained of his human body is a face and a digestive tract, and that we get the food literally looks like it's being shat out of the machine. There's something very capitalist consumption going on there too.
Okay, yeah, could be. Yeah, I mean it makes sense that there isn't a huge amount of organics to keep alive. There's clearly some of the brain is still in there. As you know, there's the skin on the face, and that's that's probably about it. So and a digestive tract, obviously, to consume the food.
Right, because we see them going out of their way to remove an extra arm. So
yes, yeah, that kind of. I mean, that's the sequence that. Because I claim Robocop as being a great horror movie as well as an action movie, and that's because I consider it a retelling of Frankenstein. And that's the Frankenstein.
I mean, there's a clear Frankenstein influence, especially the lingering on the slow waking up process like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's subconscious bleed through. Yeah.
I don't entirely understand what the setup for that range scene was supposed to be. Like, why is everyone else on the range at the exact same time as this testing? Because they haven't just left him at the police station or anything. Like, they seem to have taken him to the police station to do their diagnostic testing.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows, man? It was, I don't know. Because that's a heck of a lot of cops to be in a gun range at the same time. I mean, I get wanting to go down there to see him, but they're all shooting before he started even, so, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they all train at the same time or something. They have group sessions, I don't know.
Or something. Exactly what's going on in that scene is not entirely clear.
No. But hey, they show off the gun, they do the spin. I mean, obviously we need the spin. That's the big moment, so Nancy Allen can realise it's Murphy. That's the real point. Yeah. And I love the score on this film. Just
it is a good score.
Yeah. And again, it's something another guest. No, go. Sorry.
I failed to rewind and freeze frame and see what comic he picks up.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's ever in shot because they probably have to. No, it's too. Someone will know. I can ask the internet if you want to know.
Yeah, it's clearly a rack of Marvel comics because they've got Ron the Space Knight and Thor clearly in shot.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's
Iron Man would be the obvious thing to pick up if they're doing anything on television. It's an Iron Man comic.
That would be the obvious shout out, wouldn't it? You'd think someone who'd seen the movie over 100 times would know that, but I don't. So, yeah, I'm going to ask the internet though. You've got me curious. The internet will know. I do this sequence though. I mean, this is pure Judge Dredd. This is the unstoppable lawman and Judge Dredd.
Oh yes.
The unstoppable lawman and the psychopathic villains.
Yeah, the Robocop stops crime montage here in general is a little. It's another weird one because it's.
Yeah.
This scene, which is very good and effective, and then I don't quite get why we go on to this rape scene next.
Yeah. I mean,
there's more exposition being... And more to the point, nothing about this scene is as good as the one before it.
No. I genuinely think it's because it was the... Yeah. No, go on.
It's not... it's not escalating. You'd expect a structure where, we get a sort of bigger payoff each time. But here, it's... fundamentally less of a threat to RoboCop. The only tension is, once he's holding the knife to her throat. I mean, I get, this is set up for a stupid gag as opposed to the more interesting previous one. So I don't quite get what its dramatic purpose is supposed to be.
No, I mean, I suspect it's simply that it was the 80s, so you had to have a sexual assault scene, unfortunately. I guess it's showing
off the targeting. Every other decade.
Well, yeah, sure. But I mean, it's showing off the targeting computer, I guess. I don't know. I got nothing. I think Paul Verhoeven really thought the idea of a rapist getting shot in the balls was funny. And I think it just went from there, to be honest. Or the writer did, maybe.
And it lets you have, your proper Judge Dredd shout-out of him calling.
Yeah. Although, as the women I've had on the podcast have been very clear to point out, that's a really, really, really appalling thing to do, because for the woman involved, she's going to feel the bullet, passing through between her, and that's, in an already traumatic moment, that is going to haunt her for the rest of her life. That, that sensation of a bullet passing painfully close to incredibly vital areas. So it's kind of, apparently in the original version of the story, he was just shot in the head, and someone said, no, it'll be funnier if he shoots him in the balls. And it's like, yeah, funnier for who? Exactly.
because then we do re-escalate for the third one. The hostage rescue is obviously the bigger set piece.
Yeah, there's also actually an important thing here because the hostage negotiator is also the leader of the SWAT team, and he later gets his revenge on Robocop for stealing his limelight in this scene by using the SWAT team to execute him when he leaves OCP. So there is actually kind of, there's story happening there as well.
I had not noticed that, but yes, you're right.
No, well, stick around for another 98 viewings, it would have occurred to you.
Yeah, I'm sure I would have caught it eventually.
But I do enjoy this sequence. I think go on.
No.
I think I like the ineptitude of the hostage negotiator in this. There's something I find something delightful about it. It's something very amusing about it, and
I really like
the patheticness of the. Go on.
Yeah, the hostage taker's demands are delightful.
Yes. Well, they're just everybody in the sequence is probably absurd,
the best
aren't they?
The best demand.
Coffee, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I do like the amusement of I mean, especially given the current situation, the gag about I want to recount and no matter how it goes, I want my old job back. I think there's something quite
yes.
Given it's again there's not much. I mean, there's barely 2 dimensions to the characters, but it's at least well written. It's
yeah. When it has a sense of humor, it's usually a good one, or it's the rapist getting shot in the balls.
Yeah, that smash through the wall is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do like the wall smash. I like the cutout to the news there too. That's a good way to jump forward in the plot a little bit.
Yeah, it's a nice segue. I mean, one of the things I noticed with the news broadcast is that they're
Ayakoke Elementary School.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice deep cut.
That's a good throwaway.
Yeah. I love how the news it's clearly corporate media because the news always opens and closes with an OCP story. And then there's 20 seconds of foreign news in the middle that doesn't really make any sense because they never give you any detail about it. There's twice as much time spent on Robocop in the elementary school as there is in war in South America.
Yeah, I also like this Battleship knockoff spoof.
Yes. I would play that game, I have to say.
I sounds more fun than Diplomacy. Yeah, the OCP book ending, and I like the contextless foreign news though for its general, clear sense that things are going very badly with the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it feels like the kind of a lot of the background noise in Watchmen, doesn't it? Where you get those hints of really horrible things happening elsewhere. And this, again, I think Dark Knight Returns does that as well, if I remember rightly. There's little hints of, terrifying foreign engagements. And, I mean, obviously all of that's still rooted in, Cold War escalation. But, I enjoy those. I enjoy that kind of world-building stuff. I think it's quite well done. But it's just, I mean, what I like about it is the way
the executive lounge a bathroom? No, just
why is the what?
Thing I hadn't entirely processed on the first time is the executive lounge is a bathroom.
Yeah. Well, that's. I mean, they don't have time to relax any more than their bowels. So.
Fair enough.
You know.
And then with random numbers flashing above the urinals. Yeah. Are those stock prices?
I have absolutely. I think it's supposed to be. Yeah, I have no idea. Which doesn't make any sense because it's not a financial firm. They're a private company involved in government contracts, so that there's no need for there to be random numbers. It's the future, man.
Yeah.
And,
I like the I like Bob's narrative arc.
Yeah.
His utter, shitholery followed by just being unceremoniously killed off around the midpoint is another one of the film's more interesting decisions, I think.
Yeah. No, I really like it. Because he doesn't deserve any better than what he gets. He's an absolute scumbag, and he just gets crushed by an even more unpleasant person. That's all that happens. He just gets eaten out by someone even more vile or ruthless than him.
Yeah, and but he seems like he's going to be much bigger than he ends up being as well.
Right.
I like the amount of time that's taken in setting him up as a character, only to sort of, because he looks like he's a primary antagonist or possibly secondary main character, and then he just sort of gets whacked very unceremoniously at the halfway point.
Yeah. And in one of my all-time favourite movie execution scenes too. I mean, we'll get to it, but I think it's just, I love everything about that scene. I love the Dick Jones on the video screen. I love the way Clarence, pulls the pin out of the grenade with his tongue and teeth. Just, it's a delightful sequence, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll tell you something else funny about doing this commentary track with Jane, by the way. She completely missed the fact that Robocop's sitting in a chair. And she totally missed the chair agenda, which she was really upset about when I pointed it out. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There's some good chair here.
Yep.
So
this is the Ghost in the Machine nightmare sequence coming up. I love it's the little touches. I love the McDonald's packaging open on the desk while they're reading their newspapers while he's having the nightmare,
Yeah, that is a good touch. I forgot that McDonald's package. I didn't recognize that as McDonald's packaging. Actually, it's been so long.
Well, and I mean, it doesn't look remotely like that anymore.
Despite the fact that, as we all know, that McDonald's packaging is still perfectly preserved in landfills across America.
Well, yes, indeed. Well, and indeed Europe as well. I mean, we had the polystyrene burger cartons over here too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels completely wrong to have nostalgia for something as fundamentally symbolic of our own self-destructiveness as a species as a fucking McDonald's wrapper, but there you go.
I like that they basically lose control of him at this point. Like, he never actually comes back and follows any orders from here on out.
Nope, this is it. One bad dream and he's off to the races.
But there's also not much of an effort to get him back under control ever.
No,
until the police decide to bring him down, there's no real sense of urgency in him running off. After this, like they do a bit of running around and take a look at this, and then it's like, oh, well, he's gone. Okay.
Well, there's two things I'd say about it. One is that it seems fairly clear to me that part of what's going on is they're playing a massive game of cover your ass, right? So they spend their entire time blaming each other, and then of course blaming Nancy Allen for talking to her. I mean, by the time Bob Morton gets here, it's all her fault because she spoke to him in the corridor, which is just, I mean, I love that. I love the absurdity of that and the kind of, just the, again, corporate weasels being corporate weasels. The first thing to do is to assign blame to someone other than yourself. But also,
preferably a woman.
Yeah, absolutely, preferably a woman. And then of course, Bob Morton gets killed not long after that as well. So I imagine there's a certain amount of chaos in terms of who's in charge of the program at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. I, 'cause, 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 '
And also it happens over a fairly, I think, I mean, it's not explicit, but it's the impression I get is that this all happens from here on out. You're talking, 24 or 48 hours at the most? I mean, it's happening over a very truncated period. Yeah, a very sort of short period of time. So, given everything else that's going on.
I'm not sure quite works about the film, and it's probably for me its biggest narrative flaw is they really don't do much with Robocop's interiority, despite the fact that the film tries to hinge on it.
Sure. No, I think that's a perfectly fair comment. I think that because you get the dream. Obviously, we've got the sequence coming up where he goes through his old family home, which I think is nicely done. I mean, it's a difficult one because I think that the trouble is that they're kind of boxed in by the fiction in the sense that he doesn't have a huge amount of interiority. That's kind of the point. He really is a ghost.
Right. I mean, even as Murphy, he doesn't. It's frankly bleakly funny how trivially they can just sort of write out his family.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the notion, though, is that the idea is that Murphy really is dead. And that whatever Robocop is just, it really is just, it's just these synapses that are randomly firing that are pulling in just bits of the old consciousness that was there. But it's not like, although he claims the name Murphy at the end of the film, I don't think there's any functional way in which Robocop is Murphy or can be Murphy, I mean, that's just, I don't know.
So now you're taking it in a Swamp Thing direction.
No, I'm what, sorry?
Now you're going in a Swamp Thing direction.
Yeah, maybe.
A robot who imagines he's Alec Holland or whatever.
Right. Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's how I read it. Certainly, that's my take on it because that makes sense of what you've described, which is the relative lack of interiority to the character.
Yeah, no, that
for all
that
that we get
sense.
these, yeah, for all that we get these, because even when you get the POV shots from him, it's explicitly a video camera rather than eyes. The quality of the image is video quality, and you get those green computer text popping up as well, just to kind of remind you this is a machine POV. This is not, this is distinct from the way we see the world.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that, they predict the future, but that they don't predict, because of course the irony is if you built Robocop now, he'd have like 4K cameras, so his vision would actually be a lot better than ours.
Right, whereas instead he is grounded in television. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, for me, VHS as well. It's that kind of vibe. It's very analog.
Yeah, which was a common thing in early cyberpunk. I was fond of all of the tweets when Apple pulled the headphone jack from the iPhone. I think the best by far was William Gibson's "Thanks, Apple, for making yet another thing about Robocop, about Neuromancer, seem obsolete to future generations." Who now won't understand what jacking in means.
Sure. Well, I just wonder how long it's going to be before... No, go on.
No.
I was just going to say, I wonder how long it's going to be before we have like analog punk, which is just where like everyone's using like vinyl and it's CRT television sets and stuff.
I mean, isn't that vaporwave?
Yeah, I guess.
I haven't looked at vaporwave too closely, but I think that's more or less what that's trying to be.
Oh, okay.
Though that's a musical style rather than a narrative one.
Right. Yeah, I mean I have a There's, it's one of the things, one of the projects I keep threatening to do. I've worked out a sci-fi. I've got a sci-fi time travel concept that explicitly uses analog as an analog technology as the means by which time travel is achieved. But I don't want to say too much about it.
How very David Whittaker of you.
Thank you very much. Maybe the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my writing. But I have this terrible thing where if I talk about my writing, I end up not doing it. So
let's not do that then.
Yeah. I love this. Where are we up to, by the way? What are you saying at the minute?
This is a restricted area.
Great. Yeah, we'll
jacked in to get the information.
He's walking past the gigantic banks of computers that are now less powerful than the phones we have in our pockets.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Although I do wish that USB had been invented as a fist spike technology. I think that is a superior version of USB to the one we got.
Yeah, there are enough fist spikes.
Just on.
Period. Really, yeah. I mean, everything could use more fist spikes.
Look, as they say, a polite society is one where everyone has a fist spike. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I think that's clearly the case.
It's uncanny how much this interface looks like Windows 8 as well, I think.
Yeah. I do love cyberpunk interfaces. That's one of the pleasures of the project is definitely the graphic design of the future.
Yeah, it's delightful, isn't it? Because it's the thing about most design and practices, it's almost always evolutionary. We're always building what came before. But I love how when writers go for cyberpunk, they kind of get to start with a blank slate and say, what do I want it to look like? And you get these kind of wonderful kind of flights of fancy, which end up creating these kind of weird and wonderful things, which they never quite work. They almost never predict what actually happens because they're not evolutionary. They jump 3 or 4 steps ahead and just imagine something cool instead. But they're always
right.
fun to engage with.
That's my base claim about Neuromancer is going to be, it's literally not a book about anything other than here is a list of shit William Gibson finds cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even trying. The plot is barely coherent. The book is never actually interested in making the plot coherent. Like, the plot advances, but good luck. Like, the book doesn't put any narrative effort into calling attention to the bits where the plot is happening.
Sure.
It's just, Gibson wants to use cool language to describe things he finds sexy.
And yet, I don't know.
What's great is he basically finds the exact same thing sexy that Ridley Scott is finding sexy at the exact same year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also I think that his raw enthusiasm for the stuff he finds sexy does give the text a certain kind of crackling energy to it.
Yeah, it moves along charmingly. But it's very clearly oh shit, I have a novel. I sold a novel. I better write one. Shit.
Yeah. No, but I just think that I always think that when when artists really are pursuing something they're passionate about, that passion can carry, or a multitude of sins can get swept away, or at least swept along by the sheer kind of energy and passion of someone really digging what they're talking about.
Frankly, there is consistently in art and literature a degree to which you can get away with narrative indiscipline just as long as you have cool enough fetishes.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Countless artists and writers have gotten along on nothing other than how weird their kinks are.
Sure. Yeah, and how well they are, how brilliantly they articulate them, right? How brilliantly they express them.
What I guess I think is interesting about Gibson is I know in his later work he legitimately does settle down and, start doing interesting novels of ideas instead of just, unrestrained id about leather and mirror shades. But man, that is all Neuromancer is. Neuromancer is just Mirror Shades. Fucking A. The novel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, how old was he, though, when he wrote Neuromancer?
Oh, 20s, I'm sure. And, you know, he'd written a couple short stories. He got a offer to write a novel, basically, and just banged the thing out in a white-hot rush. And, I mean, I feel a little bad for him that he's known for what's almost certainly his worst book.
Yeah. You don't get to pick what you're known for, do you? That's the thing. You just
but you know, with Neuromancer, you know, and it's clear why that's the one that's important. But man, you know, are his later disciplined efforts clearly the more interesting novels, even if they don't have that sort of crackling inventa genre energy.
Right. Speaking of the 80s.
Yes, the obligatory cocaine scene.
Yeah, God. But, yeah. It's. I mean, again,
it's sort of staring at the cocaine scene, yeah.
What else can you do? I mean, again, I have to say, I was, you know, seeing that for the first time at age 11. I mean, it wasn't quite a religious experience, but it had a profound effect, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I can imagine, you know, much can follow from that.
Yeah, indeed. Oof. And then it gets very brutal.
Yeah, this is a good scene.
Yeah.
Bob is just such a worthless piece of shit.
He is. Yeah, he's horrible. Actually, I had an interesting thing about this. Someone else, I was having this conversation with someone else about the scene. I said, I wasn't quite sure why he didn't bleed out. I mean, he's been shot, you know, that many times in the leg. There should be blood all over the place. But someone else did point out to me cocaine is a coagulant as well as a painkiller. So actually, it's surprisingly. I think this could be medically accurate, this scene. At least vaguely.
I like that they come up with the DVD there.
Yes! Yeah, how cool was that for a prediction? Although, what I love is the DVD, but then the bank of CRT tellies, as opposed to just one flat screen, which is, of course, what would be there.
Yeah. Why does he have that many televisions? Because televisions are cool in the 80s.
Yeah, well, because of the 80s, how do you show that you've got lots of stuff? You just buy more of them, you know. That's...
Right? Yeah, you don't have the giant monitor. You have the profusion of screens. I mean, that's a hugely common 80s image. You've got the 80s Batcaves all look like that. Obviously, you've got Ozymandias. I mean, everyone is just walls of television screens in the 80s.
Yeah.
And that's you know, kind of one of the, as I think about it, and I'm working this out on the fly, but one of the big historical shifts between 80s cyberpunk and 90s cyberpunk is 80s cyberpunk is still very much rooted in television, pervasive television media. It's got the computer jacking in stuff going on, but it's not until the rise of the internet in the 90s that cyberpunk sort of rearranges itself around the computer technology instead of television technology.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you're right that the internet was predicted in various ways quite well, but yeah, they couldn't quite let go of the cathode ray tube.
Well, I mean, and you know, obviously the first sentence of Neuromancer is the sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. That's literally the opening metaphor of cyberpunk as a television metaphor.
Yeah.
But then in the 90s you have the internet starts becoming consumer technology, and you have stuff like, cyberpunk's sort of second birth with Snow Crash. which is
right.
clearly the, oh wow, an actual computer guy is writing cyberpunk now instead of, Bruce Sterling.
Yeah.
Someone who was a computer person who learned to write books instead of a book person who was interested in computers.
Sure. Are you thinking about covering Big U in that context? Because my memory is that there's some tech stuff in that as well.
I'll probably look at it because obviously Neil Stephenson is going to be a huge character in the story. Snow Crash is a sort of second birth of cyberpunk. Conceptually.
Right.
And even if he begins dismantling cyberpunk with his next book, because that's very much what Diamond Age is doing.
Right.
So yeah, I'll certainly look at Zodiac for sure, and I'll probably at least flip through Big U because at that point it'll be the only Neil Stephenson I've never read.
Okay.
But we'll see. Sure. I'm mindful that I've got rather a lot of decades, and I can't be too last worn Albion about everything on this.
Well, the question is how big you want the book to be, or how many volumes you want it to be, really, isn't it, at that point?
Right, and I kind of have, one volume. I'm kind of considering, depending on how the book shapes up, that I might shop this one around to traditional presses instead of necessarily self-publishing it.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, you want to get it done in one volume then, if you can, don't you?
Yeah.
So this is one of the. This is just one of those quintessential gunfight action sequences.
Yeah, this is just classic '80s. Everybody gets shot.
Yeah.
Though I admit, I watched it somewhat carelessly, and I was surprised to realize that all of the main gang survives. I thought we lost some of them in this scene on the first pass.
Yeah, well, you do lose one. In the lore of the 80s action movie, the Asian guy dies first. So,
of course, yes.
Yeah, so he's had about 2 lines in the whole film, and he's dead. Yeah.
Yes. There he goes.
Yeah, there you go.
Knocking the black guy out in the process.
Yes, conveniently, though, knocking him out so that he can come back, yeah.
The walking over the glass bottles of cocaine is a nice shot.
Lovely. I do like the absolute absurdity of the notion that they're actually manufacturing cocaine in Detroit as well. I think that's just glorious.
I like the earlier extended lampshading of the fact that they rob banks to buy cocaine, to buy and sell cocaine.
Yeah, no, it's really fun, isn't it? That whole kind of without having that argument about free market versus piracy, but why bother making more money when we could just steal it? It's such a great line.
Yeah, that's one of the smarter scenes in the film, actually, and I like that they, take something that didn't actually need justification and justify it at length just to make it sillier.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. I think that's one of the things that Verhoeven's actually very good at. I think that's one of the things that Starship Troopers does a few times in really fun ways. But it's something, I don't know, that's just my jam. It's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, Verhoeven is the dumb smart movie, or the smart dumb movie rather, is firmly his specialty.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's just, I love the kind of, I have a personal affinity for those directors that are prepared to just, there's no such thing as over the top as far as they're concerned. They just go for it. And he's definitely one of those directors that is not afraid of being embarrassed. He's just going to go for it. And he does occasionally fall spectacularly on his face. But at least when he does it, you feel like, well, he was really trying,
I like what's the charge is that this guy isn't, at the top of their most wanted list.
Yeah, like we didn't see him in the opening news broadcast being called the crime king of old Detroit. And how come the desk sergeant's never heard of him?
Well, he's not wearing his glasses.
Ah, of course. So
it's the Clark Kent problem.
There it is. Well, that's clearly canon. We've proven that now. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, just another piece of comic book influence.
There it is. So on the going back to the cyberpunk book for a bit. Am I right in thinking then one of the things you're going to be looking at is how, because you talked about the quote about how this is the dystopian future nobody wanted. Is that going to be one of the
right?
things
I think the epigraph. I think the epigraph from the novel is going to be "Cyber is the future." Donald Trump.
Okay.
Possibly, I'll go longer in that particular bit of word vomit, but it's going to be one of his, stupid attempts to talk about cybersecurity. I'll be the epigraph.
Right.
But okay. Yeah, your question.
No, well, I think you've answered it, but it was just, so it's just that, so that's, one of the themes is, or one of the strands is going to be about how is effectively understanding the present by looking at past predictions of the future. Is that kind of...
well, and because Gibson's career starts with this short story, The Gernsback Continuum, which is very much, him explicitly turning his back on the, classic 50s and 60s utopian sci-fi vision in favor of, his grubby worlds that still have pornography, basically. And Cyberpunk very much was about a conscious realignment of, sci-fi was wrong about space, this is the actual future.
Right.
It wasn't quite luck that Cyberpunk got there. By 1983, you're far enough along to recognize that computers are an important thing that sci-fi hadn't anticipated adequately.
Yeah.
But I don't want to suggest that Cyberpunk got luckier than past science fiction, but there was this moment of science fiction sort of realigning for what the future was actually going to be in a very conscious way.
Sure.
That's at the heart of Cyberpunk. But the other thing that really strikes me is that there's I think, reasonable argument that there's a sort of subculture that stops happening after the 90s. That, that the culture's relationship to subculture shifts at the start of the 21st century in a way that, for someone who likes subcultures and undergrounds is sad and rough.
Okay.
And I don't think is, purely a kids get off my lawn sensation on the part of people like Alan Moore. I mean, I think you can make a real case that popular culture has become more recycling based, and that there's not, the creation of new subcultures. Instead, it's new fandoms at best.
Yeah.
And cyberpunk sort of sits at the end of a chain of subcultures. So I'm fascinated by its sort of... it correctly anticipated the future, but B, it was also kind of our last cultural stab at a new aesthetic.
Oh, that's really interesting. Because, I mean, my take on that... I mean, I agree on the recycling point 100%. I mean, last weekend I took my little girl to go and see the Lego Batman movie. And I had to say I had a fantastic time, and it's a brilliant piece of writing. I mean, genuinely, it's very well written and it's very funny. But I felt profoundly strange just buying a ticket to see a movie called Lego Batman. It just felt profoundly odd to me, and there was a sense of like, what, culturally, what is going on here at this point? Where this has become a thing that enough people knew they'd get their money back on, that they were prepared to invest in to film it, so I could go, well, not film it, but produce it, so I could go and see it. So yeah, I mean that's clearly happening. That I don't think there's any arguing with that. I mean, I wonder, what do you think about the notion of like micro culture rather than subculture though? Because my sense of it is that I keep seeing lots of like sub genres. I mean, I think about this in terms of the fiction writing I do. I like horror, but there's lots of subcultures and subcultures within horror fiction, and I see the same thing happening in science fiction and music in particular, where it's like now anyone can make it. It's almost like microcultures, genres of one or two or three bands.
Yeah, which, is interesting in its own right, and obviously has its advantages, but you lose the liminal spaces that the slightly larger subculture let you have.
Right.
Subculture opens up these shared liminal spaces that are, underground but still substantial. That
sure.
Microculture, for all that there's a lot of very good stuff in, culture of three,
yeah,
you lose something there too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess, yeah, I could see that. And it's interesting, isn't it? It's that tension between the necessary outsider status and the completely understanding desire for social interaction and grouping, right?
Right. I mean, my whole interest in Doctor Who is that it exists precisely at this point.
Yeah.
That it's part of Britain's long-running effort to mediate the space between margins and mainstream.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And I feel like with microcultures, you lose the margin.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and that's also part of why I want to do push cyberpunk up through the present day. Is part of my argument I think is going to be that cyberpunk is where we got stuck. It's where our thought sort of glitched and stuck for 30 years so far.
Huh. And in that sense, the other thing, the subculture then that cyberpunk kind of reminds me of. If we take that premise and say, we just stopped calling it cyberpunk, but actually we're still functionally producing it, which I think on face value I'd accept that argument. I think that's probably true. The subculture that probably reminds me of in musical terms is metal, which has been a vibrant subculture as long as it's existed. It's had the occasional mainstream success, but it is still on the whole clearly a subculture. It's never been, metal has never become a mainstream thing in terms of, mass popular appeal. And yet it's remained strong.
And what's consistently interesting to me about metal, which is something I've never looked at much because I kind of fucking hate the music.
Sure.
But it keeps almost intersecting with things, and then not. I mean, you can dress for metal out of Hot Topic just as easily as you can dress for goth, but there's no actual musical interplay between metal and goth music, despite using the same basic wardrobe.
Yeah. And often very similar instrumentation. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the crack I make in one of the Super Nintendo project posts, which I stole from my friend Alex, that the difference between metal and nerd is little more than who the Dungeon Master is.
Yeah.
We blazed through my favorite payoff of the Star Wars platform Nuking California. Which is,
how good was that?
An utterly delightful paid-off gag there.
That's so good. Yeah, and I'm glad they went with that as opposed to some really disturbing end game for the South African nuke, because that could have been a real bummer. But having the peace platform misfire and destroy Santa Barbara, that's very cute.
Yeah.
And it was that line about three ex-presidents among the dead.
Yes.
Really
Once again, when it aims for when it aims for comedy, it's got a good sense of it.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. What it lacks in subtlety, it makes up for in bite. I think it does pretty well.
I thought you were going to go for what it lacks in subtlety, it makes up for in lack of subtlety.
Lack of subtlety, yeah. Well, there's that too. Speaking of, I do enjoy this scene between them. This is the only scene these two get together on camera, and I really enjoy how they play it.
Yeah, it's interesting that their collusion isn't actually particularly set up before he reveals it to get out of being arrested by Robocop.
Yeah.
It's obvious. He has to be working with someone on the inside of OCP, but it's also very much an oh shit, the movie's going to end if we don't do something. Plot twist.
Yeah. But they do a good job of selling it, I think.
This guy emerges sort of satisfyingly over the film because he looks like an idiot due to the 209 malfunction scene.
Yeah.
And then he sort of steadily turns out to be competent. Right.
Well, he's competent at things other than robot building, at least.
Well, I mean, he figures out, he gets Directive 4 into Robocop somehow.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a lovely bit of corporate espionage, isn't it? Bit of sabotage.
Yeah. Interdepartmental shenanigans, yeah.
Well, and it kind of retroactively makes you realise what a schmuck Bob Morton was, because he didn't, he had no clue. And actually, Bob Morton probably wasn't a senior director, so he probably could have been arrested by Robocop if he'd broken the law.
Probably. The face scene is coming up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's...
there's Robocop in yet another chair.
Yeah. I do like this sequence. It's, again, they pull a trick that they pulled earlier. When Robocop is first created, we don't see him fully on camera for quite a while. You keep seeing glimpses of him. There's a glimpse of him on a video screen. He's behind frosted glass. All that kind of thing to build it up. There's a similar trick here where the first we see of the face is in the mirror, which I think is a really smart bit of filmmaking.
He is a great bit of design.
Yeah.
Without ever having seen the film growing up, the visual design of RoboCop always struck me. That's my other big memory is, every poster or photo of RoboCop I saw was clearly fucking awesome.
Yeah. No, it was. I mean, that poster with him getting out of a car and the tagline "Part man, part machine, all cop." That's one of the great movie posters of all time, without question. It's just absolutely brilliant. And most of that is simply the machine design. It's so good.
Yeah, that visor is just a thing of wonder.
Yep.
Yeah, the mirror is interesting because it also, makes him look more monstrous than he's actually going to end up when we cut to him.
Yeah, because it's bent and distorted. I think it's an incredible physical effect, this one. And every time I see it, I can't help but bemoan the fact that nowadays you do this digitally without a second thought, with a 10th of the cost and a 20th of the effort, but it just looks so good.
Yeah. The flip side is you imagine RoboCop's movements would be a little more fluid and interesting with CGI.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
because they just they just shoot him in green spandex and CGI it in, so you can get fluid motion instead of big, stompy, awkward costume.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I like the big, stompy, awkward costume.
I like it, but I think about the only good idea that Nightmare and Silver had, and of course then they insisted on taking it out, was having the Cybermen be sleek and silent instead of stompy metal foot soldiers.
Sure. Oh, they had the super fast movement in that too, right? That was the one where they were just...
Yeah. I think the stompy robot has, I think, been harmed by the rise of zombies.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Because it's basically the same thing, right?
I like that he breaks the window just to tune to the shitty comedy sketch.
Yeah. Well, the cops are on strike, so, it's the land of do what you want, isn't it, at that point?
Yeah. They do more of this sequence than you'd expect that we're about to get.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the only... I mean, it is the only scene where you have these guys and they're not either shooting at someone or being shot at. So...
Well, they're certainly shooting.
Well, yeah, that's true, yeah. So it's the only one where no one's firing... That's true, yeah. It's the only one where no one's firing back. So I guess they take the opportunity to kind of establish who they are. But I think also they just...
Which turns out to just be cackling madmen.
Yeah, it turns out they
scratch the surface of these characters to discover more surface.
Yeah, pretty much. And I just think it's a really fun sequence. It's just, again, on that kind of 11-year-old watching shit blow up level. It's just really fun,
Yeah,
and there is the little character notes between them, the way they're one-upping each other, the way that Clarence blows up the guy's car. I mean, that's sort of...
Yes. It's like I feel like this must have been shot fairly late in the sequence, because there's a certain decision-making process that feels like, shoot another sequence, check budget. Okay, we can do another explosion.
Yeah, it could be. This could be like, what, we managed to get in, like, $250,000 under budget. Let's blow some shit up.
He's in the steel mill and the budget's out. On with the film.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Yeah, we don't want to have to do a maximum overdrive where we just run a title card at the end of the last explosion because we really have run out of money. So, to the final act, yeah. So this is where the movie, for me, this is where it pivots to becoming almost a Western. This, for me, feels like a classic Western sequence. From him getting his eye back in with his gun through to the final confrontation with the posse of bad guys riding into town.
Yeah, that it is very much a Western conclusion. Really, once you get to the, he's holed up in his bolt hole and, has to fight his way out. Yeah,
and I mean the fact that it's the same place where the venue is the same place where Murphy died. So that, obviously there's the coming full circle there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, again.
And the fact that he's we see his face from here on out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That changes him as a character.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Although I love how weird it looks. It genuinely, for me, is still... That effect is still a little bit hard on the eye when I look at it. I know how it was done. I've looked it up, but I still can't quite see the effect,
Yeah. So, I know your policy is there are no sequels, but... So, what is awful about the two sequels?
Just everything. Well, it's two things. One, they're very, 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 very bad compared to this. But two... This is the story of Robocop, and it's perfect and complete, and I just feel absolutely no need. There's any sequel is superfluous, any auxiliary material is superfluous. This is a complete story. It's a complete action. and at the end of it, it's told and it's done. And I just, truthfully, if the sequels had been genuinely brilliant or they'd advanced the story in some way, I might have decided to recognise them. But for me, the quality drop off between this and even Robocop 2, let alone anything else, is so abrupt and so obvious, and the remake as well. I
was going to ask, how bad is the remake?
I haven't seen it. I've refused to watch it. It's not R-rated.
That's
and for me,
a
that
flaw,
kind of
certainly.
It just inherently disqualifies it for me. I mean, it really does. I don't. I've got a certain number of years left to live, and I don't know exactly how many they are. But why would I spend them watching shittier versions of my favourite movie? I just,
and
when I could just watch my favourite movie again and chat about it with people,
I was. It might have been worth doing if Darren Aronofsky had stayed on board, but.
Well, I mean,
I kind of want to see
David
Aronofsky's Robocop, but.
Well, I am toying with making it a stretch goal for the Patreon, because this podcast is funded by Patreon backers, and it's paying for itself thanks to their generosity, and thank you all, your wonderful, wonderful people. But I think I might add stretch goals for that, where if it gets to a certain level, I will actually record a commentary for either one of the sequels or the remakes, which will largely consist of me just swearing. But it might be a fun exercise. Now this is a really fun, talking of expensive effects sequences, by the way, but oof.
Yeah, it's there's a real strange horror to this. It's another one where you're like, okay, that was an interesting place to spend your focus for a couple minutes.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me is the sheer amount of, the amount of cost and effort that will have gone into that makeup, and I think it's about 45 seconds screen time total. It's a fantastic investment for just to get that one effect, that moment of sheer visceral body horror. It's absolutely terrifying.
That doesn't actually have much to do other than, wanting to be cool and get rid of Ray Weiss's character.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's very little point to it. I guess it does, well, yeah, I mean, Clarence hits him in the car, and because he hits him in the car, he loses control of the vehicle and ends up... So I guess it has a purpose within the overall sequence. But it's
not like, getting Clarence out of the car is that hard a problem to solve.
No. It's a deliberately, incredibly spectacular way of doing it. Spectacular and awful. Yeah. But again, I think it just speaks to that kind of... And it's one of those things when I do this podcast with people who saw this film as a kid, it is the scene where they just shudder. It's the moment where they go, oh yeah, I remember this bit. It embedded itself in the memory, that image.
So what happened to Ray Weiss's character? Did he just sort of vanish off
screen? Still alive. No, he's about to get into the... Yeah, there he is. No, he's...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is really important now. He's going to be incredibly pivotal in the next 30 seconds or so, yeah.
Oh yes, now I remember how this goes.
Yeah. I love the editing on this sequence. The way it's cut together, the storytelling here, it's so... Maybe it's just because I've seen a lot of crappy action movies since, where it gets confused, especially with the hyper-cutting, but this is really good storytelling, I think.
Yeah, this is well framed.
Yeah. And the different elements, the cuts between the different elements, so you get the timing of it. I mean, it doesn't seem that hard to do to me, but then you see it done badly a few hundred times and you realise there must be some talent involved.
Right, no, and it's very hard to clearly communicate space in an action sequence.
Yeah.
Okay, there's Ray Weiss going down.
Yeah. Oh, he gets a fairly spectacular send-off, you got to say.
More fist
because there's no way that it was just going to be used for USB, is there? Let's be honest.
No, and Chekhov's fist spike.
Exactly, yeah, and that arterial splash on the chest as he pulls it out as well. That's just so good. And it's, you know, I mean, here we are. We've got about. Yeah, they fix everything, isn't it? Yeah, it's great. They fix everything. And again, the efficiency of the storytelling. I mean, this is it now. We've got about 5 minutes to run now. Like, they don't muck about. We've had the big action sequence. We've had the showdown. So now it's just, you know.
Yeah, taking down the overvillain that we created.
Yeah. And they even play that out in microcosm with this Raiders of the Lost Ark. I assume this is a Raiders of the Lost Ark gag, repurposed, this, with the Ed 209 coming out. Because you might think, oh yes, another big fight, and then not so much.
Yeah. Because, I mean, once you've done the Ed 209 falling down the stairs, there's not much left to do with them.
There's nowhere to go from that, is there? You're not going to top it, so...
No.
I like how that plays out, though. I think that's fun. And I love the headless legs and the twitching toe as it collapses as well. Again, it's just those little touches.
Yeah, the Ed 209's a good bit of design.
Yeah. No, they had fun with that, I think. Now, this is the point where Daniel Harper said he wished Robocop had come in with like one of those circular barrel chain guns from Terminator 2 and just killed everyone. He thinks that would have made a better ending for the film.
Yeah, though they would have had to work around Directive 4 in a very different way.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how you get that done. But I understand his feeling in terms of emotional satisfaction. That might have been fun. Although I personally prefer the ending we get, because as I said, I really like the cynicism of it. I think that for me, and I'm sure I'm reading too much into this, but for me, the point of the movie is that you should leave the theatre actually feeling angry about the state of the world. You shouldn't come out feeling good. You should come out feeling pissed off that the bad guys in suits are still running the world, because they are, you know. And I think sending people out into the world with that message and that in their bellies is probably quite a good thing to do.
Yeah. The cynicism of the ending and the sort of abruptness of it.
Yeah.
Do they actually resolve that she survives even?
Nancy Allen.
No, they leave her in the mud with they fix everything, don't they?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cynical.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, you know, we can't claim this is a film that really cares about women characters, or indeed women, really. Let's be honest.
No, not at all. But it would have been much more conventional to end on him, you know, reuniting with her, and instead we get this.
Yeah. And that's it. Yeah, just like that, the title card and the theme. I mean, I like the smile, I like the Murphy line, but it's still it's still not anything near what you could call a happy ending, I don't think.
No, it's a nicely bleak one.
Yeah. Which I think, you know, well, and again, with the cyberpunk aesthetic that you're talking about, I think that fits quite well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because cyberpunk isn't quite dystopian in its attitude, because it revels in the cynical grit of it. It's more outside the utopia-dystopia distinction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's oddly... Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, it is oddly... Well, not oddly, but it's... Yeah, there's a celebratory aspect to it as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
If not occasionally a voyeurism as well.
Yeah, it's a little more amoral in its attitude than... You know, anything as simple as utopia or dystopia.
Yeah. Well, and this has been, as the credits roll, this has been Watching Robocop with Kit Power and Phil Sandifer. Phil, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. I really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Can you let the listeners know where they can find you on the internet if they want to learn more about you and your work?
You can find me on the same place you find probably half of Kit's guests, eruditorum.press.com. I just run the Madhouse instead of contributing to it. Or if you search, Philip Sandifer on Amazon, you'll find all sorts of books. If you liked all the blather about comics, I highly recommend Last War in Albion, which is my newest book and about the magical war between Alan Moore and Grant Morrison. It has bits on American Flag, Judge Dredd, Halo Jones, all sorts of good stuff. Yeah, that's me. And I'll have my next book, Near Reaction to Basilisk, out probably late spring, early summer.
And, I mean, Near Reaction to Basilisk was my non-fiction book of last year, and I know the version you're bringing out will be heavily revised and updated, won't it? It's going to have a substantial amount of extra essays in it, is that correct?
Yeah, it's going to have the main essay. I'm just going to, I think, add some footnotes to it as opposed to a big revision to that. But it'll have The Blind All-Seeing Eye of Gamergate,
right,
which is my think piece on Gamergate and its existential horrors. It'll have a revised thesis on Trump, because that didn't quite work out like I planned.
Yeah, you and the rest of the fucking world. Jesus Christ.
And then right now I'm actually revising the big mess of notes and paragraphs that Jack Graham gave me on Austrian school economics into a coherent, shaped essay that goes with the concerns of the rest of the book. And then I'm going to have one on trans-inclusive radical feminists, one on David Icke and lizard people, and I had been going to have a short story, but I think events got ahead of me, and I'm going to swap that out for an essay on Peter Thiel instead.
Okay. So I'm buying this book twice, is what we're saying. That's okay, fine. No, that's fine. I can live with that. That's with a physical copy.
I would rather sell 2 copies of everything than one. Yeah.
Yeah, good work if you can get it. No, but I did. Yeah, on a serious note, I have been a fan of your work for a long time. I followed Eruditorum Press back when it was the Phil Sandifer blog, and even before that, when it was and your Doctor Who work. I've thoroughly enjoyed. I've got all your paperbacks on my shelf of the Doctor Who editions, and I'm really. Oh yeah, I'm going to nag you about that while I've got you on mic. What's the how's the McCoy era? How's that coming along the book?
I sent the first chunk of essays off to Jane a little over a week ago for copy editing. All the television essays, so it'll be out this year. It's going to be summer fall probably, because I've only just started the revisions on it, and it's going to be a fucking monster of a book. Because for only having 12 stories, McCoy stuck around for a really fucking long time.
Well, and also I think, am I right that it's your favourite era of the show as well? So
yeah, it is. The essays tend toward a certain degree of length. At least for the television stuff. And then the New Adventure stuff, I kind of... that's not every essay from the blog is going to make it in, I think, because there were a lot of essays that were only there because I can only read books so fast, and I needed to slip in a television thing, whether it made sense or not, just to have the timing work.
Sure.
So that one, there might be some, kind of fundamental rethinking of how those essays even work and are structured. So it's a bit of a bigger job than some of the revisions.
Yeah, well, I think, no, I'm sure it'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to all of them. I mean, and the paperbacks, I'll stop talking about it in a minute, but I love the art design on the paperbacks. It's so
James is amazing.
Yeah.
And he does all my book covers and is just fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, no, and they look so good together on the shelf. It's really cool. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, I like the fact that they have no consistent trade dress whatsoever.
Yeah, it's brilliant, except for the distress thing, which is also really nice.
Which will be going along always soon, because the books will be newer.
Right.
I think 7 is going to be the last one James distresses.
Yeah, I thought I figured you'd probably drop it when you reach New Who. I thought that would be the natural point to drop.
Yeah, that's the plan, because James roots the James and I have had long conversations about his elaborate sets of rules and aesthetics for those covers. But he roots them in the last year that the book covers. Okay. So McCoy is going to be mid-90s design as opposed to late 80s.
Right.
And then the one after that is going to be 2005, because I'm not stupid enough to put Paul McGann in his own book.
No, that was... No, I think even for you, the notion of writing 60,000 words about the TV movie is probably like, no, you're not going to do that.
You've got all the Big Finish and novels, but no one cares.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that is the problem. Certainly not enough people care. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and Eccleston, since he only had one season, was always going to either go in the Tennant book or the McGann book.
Sure.
The Tennant book makes more thematic sense. The McGann book actually sells copies of that. So.
Yeah. No, I can see that's probably how it will go. Anyway, again, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, go on.
I was going to say, and it will give them again a nice book, a nice arc, because then it, instead of being, there's a bad TV movie and then Doctor Who just sort of spirals out into incoherence and sputters to a stop, it becomes this sort of parallel structure of the failed relaunch and the successful relaunch.
Yeah. No, I think that'll work very well, also, just aesthetically ending the book on an up rather than a down probably just works better as well, doesn't it?
Especially because, frankly, Davison, Baker, and McCoy both end on downer notes.
Sure.
So three in a row just gets a little bleak.
Yeah. And there's a happy bit to tell, so let's tell it.
Yeah.
Okay, well
the
thank
end
you so
credits
much.
ended a while ago, so I've the credits wraps.
Yeah, no, the credits have rolled. I'm getting warned not to pirate this movie in about 17 different European languages, so I think that's a good place to stop. That's it. I'll just stopping recording.
So that's it. That's our show. Thank you again so much to Dr. Sandifer for agreeing to come on the show. And again, go and check out the good doctor's work over at eruditorum.press.com, and also go over to Amazon and buy the books, because the Doctor Who books are absolutely fantastic. As is Neo Reaction of Basilisk, it's normally the case that Dr. Sandifer book makes my best non-fiction book of the year. So yeah, any of those titles really, quality pretty much guaranteed and recommended on my part. Again, just a quick reminder, if you've enjoyed the show, chuck us a rating on iTunes if you want. We could do with a few stars there. That would help us gain a bigger audience. And again, if you are able to support us financially, you are in a position to do that. I'd be incredibly grateful, even as little as $1 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/KitPower. As little as $1 a month will get you early access to the show, weekly access to new writing, and loads of bonus goodies. So go and check that out. All right. So next episode is already recorded in the can. We'll be coming to you within the next week or so. Very excited to be bringing you that. And next month, tune in for the very first episode of the new show, Kit and It. Really excited to bring that with returning guest George Lee, who you'll remember, of course, from the recent commentary track on Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. Wonderful guest. Really happy to have him back. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the show. Spread the word. Let people know that you've enjoyed the show. Recommend they download it themselves. And until next time,
go Robo!